Um, I recognize some names. I don't recognize some, which is fine. That's totally fine. I'm Aaron Soto, if you really must. I teach people network security. It's like a thing that I love to do. And so like when Alex is talking about this CTF stuff, that's what I like. So Alex, I don't know if you hit the record button, but you're more than welcome to if you want. Okay. I'm being silently recorded. Fine. All right. So as part of learning about InfoSec, like I think that probably the best way to do this is by playing CTFs. I'm a little biased in this. CTFs, I think, are ways that you can learn skills that you would otherwise never get the chance to. You get to play in environments you wouldn't otherwise get the chance to. You'd get to attack things that, like, technically, legally, you're not supposed to attack. So, like, so Alex gave a perfect example of CCDC. You spend 2 days defending yourself and all these systems from, professional hackers. And then at the end of the event, you get to go hang out with those hackers who just spent 2 days making your life a living hell. And they get to tell you, I was on your firewall. If you'd have just changed your firewall password, like you'd patched everything and like we were hanging on by a thread, but like we had the firewall. And if you'd have just changed that password, you'd have knocked us off your whole network. Like, when are you ever going to get the chance to actually talk to somebody and learn stuff like that? So anyway, I like CTFs, but I also like building them. Like, I like making CTFs. I don't know, maybe I'm a little messed up in the head, but like I prefer building them than playing them. Like, playing them is fun. You learn some skills and stuff, but I like teaching. And so building CTFs kind of taps into that teaching thing. I have to be honest, it's not always gone well. Anybody in UT-CTF will tell you I've screwed up, I've messed things up, I've broken environments, I spend time running around flailing trying to figure out why this isn't working. There's been a lot of failures along the way. So I thought it'd be fun to just spend some time and talk about like some of the first CTFs I made and work my way through, some of the more recent stuff. Things that, over time I've actually got to be proud of, but like, it's taken some learning. So what I'm really doing, I will just put it out there, is about 10 years ago now, I put together an event with someone at a hackerspace in Maryland called Unallocated Space. And so we made Unallo CTF. And he and I both just kind of put this together ourselves. We thought it'd be fun. And at the end, we ended up kind of doing a little presentation talking about like all the things that went wrong. And so what I'm doing tonight is I'm going back, I'll talk about that, like I'll start with that, but I'm just going to keep going based on that and really talk about the things that I've learned over about 10 years of messing this up. So I've done an Allo CTF was the first one I did. OpenSOC is an event that DEF CON does. Well, it's at the DEF CON Blue Team Village. And so that I've done and learned a lot of things wrong, like about how not to write your own, scoreboard, how not to use other people's scoreboards. There's a conference called Zeek Week that I did a CTF at. Actually, Zeek Week is happening right now, if I can put in a plug, zeek.org. They just did the user day today. They have a developer day tomorrow, and they've got a CTF going on there. But I did a CTF with them last year too. And then my job now is I get to go teach people and make CTFs, which is pretty cool. So whatever, I'm not here to talk about my company because I'm not gonna, whatever. But I'll talk about the event I built and a little bit about like the back end and things that I've learned along the way. So basically I've done this several times. The common theme is the scoreboard will always break on you, but lots more will come along. So anyway, let me start off at the beginning. Unallocated CTF, this was like 10 years ago. There's a space, a hacker space in Maryland. If you ever get the chance, if you're in Maryland, go check out Unallocated Space. It's a really cool, like they have a physical, like a area they lease, but it's They do classes. They have, you know, 3D printers and laser cutters and like all the physical stuff. But they also do like InfoSec classes. So they teach you how to use Metasploit. A lot of the same, you know, the same spirit as ISSS. And so at the time there was a guy's, his handle was Forgotten, no, literally Forgotten. And he was the president of Unallocated at the time. He really loved CTFs. I was just kind of getting started in Allocated. I've played in CTFs, and we were both talking about like, hey, how hard could it be to make a CTF? It would be really fun to make one for this space, like for this community. And so we came up with this Unallocated CTF. Now, unlike a lot of CTFs at the time, a lot of CTFs were very, you know, either team versus team, or like red team focused, where you're all just focused on attacking things. And I wanted this to be a little bit different, where it wasn't just like writing an exploit. I called it a network exploration challenge. The idea just being like, you're on this big network, you have no idea what's out there, and you're just kind of like, it wasn't just like, okay, there's a machine, you attack a service, you get a flag, you get points. It was like, no, you get on that machine, there might be some flags, okay, but then that machine gets you further. Or you find some credentials that might get you to another machine, or you might find a new network, or you might find whatever. And so you were kind of swimming around. There wasn't like a clear path where like you had to do this, 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 this. You were just swimming around this network, which was fun for me. And I really wanted to just bring people into the space. I wanted to welcome people into the world of CTF. So we did this over Memorial Day weekend. Jesus, I put the date on there. Oh God, 2013. Okay, 7 years ago. And it was a reasonably small event. We had local teams, we had remote teams, which I was super proud that we pulled off. And it was just like a day, it was 6 hours. But we set people up there, you know, each team had their own table, we set up switches and everything, and everybody just kind of came in and took over the space, and we ran the event. And it was actually a lot of fun. We had a blast. So the infrastructure, I actually still have a couple of the ESX servers that we used, which is not to say good things, but so ESX was the hypervisor that like all these virtual machines are running on. And so I had a couple of these crappy machines that I'd put together and like bought as much RAM as I could. We found some switches in the back and like a pile that we hooked up stuff. I set up a pfSense firewall so people could get out to the internet, and then started building these targets. And so on the right, all the scribbled notes is like my map of what I wanted, you know, things to be. So the idea was like there were different places, different vectors that you could come in, and then you could kind of like move around between the boxes. That was kind of the point, is that you were just kind of swimming around a little bit. This space had a traffic light that you can control over IRC. So, you know, it was like people on IRC got more active, the traffic light would change colors. And so I incorporated the traffic light as to like one of the challenges. And we threw this kind of like air-gapped area where like, if you happen to find there was like this Wi-Fi network that you could break into, and there was like an XP system over there, and like you could go find some flags and stuff. And so anyway, it was just a bunch of systems, a bunch of fun. Had no idea what we're doing. Well, okay, a couple of things off the top. SCADA, if you're not familiar with, these are like very custom built devices that are very sensitive to like what commands and things that you send them. And so when you loose a bunch of hackers on some hardware that's very, very finicky, we bricked it. We bricked the traffic light. So that was a pain. We had a backup box. We bricked that one too. So lesson number one, if you're using like SCADA hardware or any specialty hardware, be careful with that. Have backup plans. That whole little Mac Mini thing, that little Wi-Fi network that I was talking about, no one found it. So all of the work that I put into like setting up that whole wireless network and setting up those challenges, I was trying to be coy and not tell people about it. It was a total waste of time. Otherwise, it went pretty well. I mean, people moved around. Keeping, so I'm dating myself. Keeping in mind this was 2013, so there were a lot of exploits. MS-8067, MS-10061 were very popular in that time, and so like those were two vulnerabilities that we used. Otherwise, it was just like machines with weak passwords, machines that had VNC servers running, a lot of services just kind of running that you might be able to find the credentials to on other machines. So like, for example, you get on that Windows machine. with one of these Microsoft exploits, and then you'll find like SSH keys, and that'll get you on another machine. Or you might find like an SSH session that's open that you can take over the console and like move around. So the idea was that like flags would be pretty easy to spot. They would have kind of consistent little, nomenclature. So UAS for an allocated space. And it wasn't like, there was a service that you would attack and get a flag. It was like you got on this box. You had to figure out, what is this thing? Like, who's the user on this? Do they have bookmarks? Do they have email? Are there documents? Let me look through their web history. There were a couple of vulnerable web apps that we had, but most of it was just kind of like trying to get a feel for the environment. So one of the challenges, and okay, give me some credit, it was 2013, was a scoreboard. We needed a scoreboard to keep track of things, right? And so the idea was that, I wanted to be able to figure out which flags are on which host. I didn't want to tell people like, oh, there's 3 flags on that machine, because then you'd look for 3 and you'd stop. And I always wanted you to feel like, maybe I didn't get them all. So I wanted to have a public scoreboard, let people submit these flags, have some of the basic things, a little timer, announcements, whatever, pretty straightforward. And I'm at the time, PHP seemed like a great idea. I mean, there are plenty of tutorials. It's really easy and lightweight to pick up. I'm still an old curmudgeon who would still rather write PHP than like whatever JavaScript framework is the one of the week. But like, okay, I know PHP. Let's do this. Let's knock this out. So, all right, cool. I knock up this I've got the scoreboard up here. As you can see, I have a beautiful eye for design. I stole the Microsoft Windows logo and just superimposed the unallocated space logo on it. And this was the public scoreboard, and so people could submit. And then there's like a little submit the flag link here that people could use. And so it takes them to a little page, and they put in the hash that we gave their team. And then they put in whatever flag they found, and they click the button and they get the points, right? Super simple. By the way, if at any point in this, you're welcome to, I'm watching the chat, you're welcome to unmute and interrupt me. That's fine. If you can't tell, this is gonna be really informal. Anyway, all right, cool. I got the scoreboard, I got these flags, I got this flag submission page. And so you put in like your team hash, and then there's just this little MySQL database in the back end that keeps track of like who submits what and what flags. So you put in your team hash and you submit your flag, and like, okay, cool, great. What could possibly go wrong? Nothing. Went perfectly. Well, hypothetically, if you go to that little page and you put in your team hash and you know the structure of the flag, so you do something like UAS and you put some wildcards in there, and then you hit the submit button. Well, behind the scenes, what's happening is I thought of this. It's fine. No, it's cool. I thought of this. There's this thing in PHP called MySQL real escape string, and what it does is it makes sure that like there's no quotes or anything, that no one's going to do SQL injection, except that it doesn't check for wildcards, which you can find in the documentation if you happen to look for it afterwards, but clearly I didn't. So this MySQL real escape string was the bane of my existence, which means that when someone submitted a flag, basically it just put it into that query. There's many things I did wrong, but let's start with writing your own scoreboard at all, using PHP, whatever. On this query, using a like. Why did I use a like? I have no idea. That was a terrible idea. I should not have done that. An equals might have saved me. That would have made life a lot easier. Obviously, if I'd done better input checking, that would have done things better. But okay, all right, here's the deal. You go in, you type this in, and you hit submit, and you get a flag, right? So you get 100 points. Because each flag's 100. They were all different points, but whatever. You get 100 points. If you go back and you do it again, it says, "Oh, I'm sorry, you already submitted that flag." And the reason for that is because I'm tracking on the back end, like, okay, but that SQL statement returned back the first flag that matched. And so every time it's going to return back the first flag. So like, all right, this is bad, but you can at most get one flag, right? It's not too bad. So what happens if you go back to that form and instead you give it like a partial match? Because I can go into this form and I can say like UAS-1 and put wildcards, and then UAS-2 and put wildcards, and work my way through and slowly brute force every single flag that there is as you work your way through the scoreboard. Okay. So yeah, that didn't go quite as well as planned. So lesson learned, SQL injection is it's bad. Having that structured flag definitely cost me. The right way to do this is to use prepared statements if you're using PHP. So basically you put things in a certain location with question marks, and then you can fill them in later. And so that helps. Having not used a like statement would have helped. There are many, many things that I could have done to have prevented this from happening. That said, I will say, when you're doing an event like this, you have to be prepared for people to find clever solutions like this. So I wasn't mad. I can't get mad at someone who finds this, because that's the whole point. That's why we're there, is to learn. So it was an awesome teachable moment for me. And so the one thing that I did have is my colleague and I were both network forensics people. So we're watching this stuff coming in. We're seeing the logs. We're seeing the packet captures. We know who's doing this. We see it happening. And so we go over and we talk to the teams and we say, haha, very funny. I'm going to clear that off the scoreboard. I'm going to give you some points because that was smart. Like, that was genius. Don't do it again. So like, be prepared for that. It's fine. But okay, that's, one of the ways that we shot ourselves in the foot. There were others. There were some things that we got right. Let me talk about those. The targets. So because these were machines that were, visible machines. Yes, is Aaron following the chat? Yes. So when you have all these targets up, especially with things that are exploitable, you need to figure out how to make them resettable or how to make them stable. These exploits knocked everything over constantly. So I didn't mind, like, for example, well, you got to send me a donation, okay? I don't mind if teams are fighting over a machine. Like, if there's a VNC server there, the whole point of it is that it's unauthenticated and you guys are kicking each other off the machine back and forth, trying to quickly, get a Metasploit payload or something on before, the other machine kicks you off. So like, all right, that's built into the fun, right? But when you go in and you like patch a machine or you kill the VNC server or stuff like that, like that to me is uncool. And you can debate it with the rules and strategy and whatever, but like, for my event, I don't want that. So I'm happy to revert boxes. I really should have had better monitoring set up. If you like, since I was using ESXi, VMware tools was a new cool thing at the time. And so like, you can monitor processes that are running and you can kind of query the virtual machines. What could go wrong with that? Probably like container escapes and I don't know. I leave that to you. I'm not gonna mess with that. But it would have been cool to at least have some monitoring set up. Yes, chatter, everything. I'm sure there were absolutely people that use chatter to block people off. All right, so okay, not all of it was terrible. Well, some things were terrible. One of my favorite stories from this was there was a team that thought it would be cool to art poison everybody on the network, because like, hey, now I can, capture everyone's flags or knock people off. Well, what I'd done was I mentioned I had switches on everybody's table. Everybody had their own VLAN. And so when this dude starts art poisoning and incidentally screws it up because the traffic isn't being forwarded right, the team is walking over to me and they're saying like, hey, the scoreboard's down, everything's down. I'm like, no, but you should go talk to that guy over there because he's messing up your network. So it didn't affect any of the other teams, but it knocked them out for like an hour. And so anytime you get the opportunity to like isolate teams or isolate people, go for it, because that made my night. On the flip side of that, we used pfSense. pfSense had these floating rules that I was trying to use. So I had a floating rule to just say like block traffic to the firewall, because I don't want people breaking into the firewall. I want them breaking into the other targets. So I had a floating rule to say block traffic on port 80. Turns out that did not do what I wanted. Firewall was totally open to everyone. Fortunately, had a good password. Nobody got onto it, but it'd have been really nice to have some better monitoring. At the time, NetFlow, so NetFlow is a thing that like lets you see like IP addresses and ports and protocols and timestamps and like really high level information. It doesn't let you see like what's going on inside the connection, but it lets you know who's talking to who. And like having NetFlow would have been easy, would have been super easy, and let us kind of make sure that things are up. Now that, well, I'll be honest, I work for people who love Zeek, and I love Zeek. If you played in the CTF that we did, gosh, back in like February, I think, you got to know Zeek a little bit, but Zeek is a tool that does way more depth. It gives you way more information about network monitoring, and it's super easy to set up. So like having Zeek monitoring would have been amazing for this. I really wish we'd have known about it at the time. All right, other things. Well, planning. So we had this big spreadsheet, and we're like, okay, cool. We're going to plan this out months in advance, and we're going to spreadsheet out everything, and then completely disregard all of that and go into a last-minute panic and try and build everything in the last 36 hours before the event. I slept very little. It was really exhausting. Moral of the story, with two people, both of whom are procrastinators and not really good at planning, or really good at like making a spreadsheet about a plan but not actually following up, that was no bueno. So it didn't give us a lot of time to test, which fortunately didn't come back to bite us too much. But you know, get a team behind you is, I guess, what I learned from this. Registration. So I wanted people to be able to play. You know, we actually had some remote spots, which was pretty scary at the time. And we had actually a team in Florida take second place as a remote team, which I was like, hell yeah, that's awesome, because they didn't have the traffic light there. They didn't have Wi-Fi. Like they didn't have they were at a disadvantage. But I didn't want to make it free, because if you make it free, people sign up, and then it's just like, I'm not going to really do this. Like, or I'll just sign up and then I'll figure it out later. So what we did was we put like $5 for the entry and just said like, hey, we'll have food, you know, your $5 goes towards food or whatever. And if anybody like had the slightest inclination to say like, well, you know, I don't know, you know, like if you're a student or if you're whatever, like just fine. What I really wanted was like this tiniest level of commitment from people to say like, I'm actually going to show up and be there, because I had to hold a team, like a spot for you. We used Eventbrite. Eventbrite took a cut of the cash, which was like, okay, fine, I get it. I will say, having worked with Eventbrite since then, their API is the worst thing imaginable, and they try and like lock you in and don't give you data out and don't let you write and modify things. This is the hell I've been living over the last week with a conference that I'm running. So Eventbrite for like something simple was great. Eventbrite for like a big event, I would never do. That would be a terrible thing, but something to consider. Rules. Well, okay. I said no hacking the scoreboard. What did people do? They hacked the scoreboard. I went over to the team that was doing it and, you know, said, okay, well done. Have some points. Stop doing it. They kept doing it. I said, if you keep doing it, we're going to disqualify you. They kept doing it. I disqualified them. It really sucked because they were in first place. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're winning. Why are you doing this? But I mean, I told their teammates that like, this is what's going on. You guys figured out. You wanted these people on your team. So I want to, you know, balance being like a good CTF host and saying, all right, that challenge was down or broken, or like that was a really clever workaround and I'd love to give you some more points for that. Or you found a vulnerability in like my infrastructure or my scoreboard. I want to give you some points for that. I want to recognize that because that's cool and that's what we're here for. But if you're gonna be jerks to people, I'm sorry, like I'm gonna have to kick you out. So they took it well. I mean, you know, the team understood that they had a couple people that were just doing this. That was tough for me at the time. It really did suck at the time. But giving them multiple chances, explaining what was going on, you know, I fully feel like it was the right thing to do. So, all right, you know, we said, all right, cool. Next time, more challenges, you know, more variety of things, maybe even some hints, some tips. One thing that what I was trying to do with this is have people do write-ups, is have people actually say, you know, what they found and what they solved, and then for the best write-up, you know, we would give points for that. And so we didn't get a chance to actually do that. I really would have liked to. I also would have really liked to have gotten feedback from people like at that moment. So one thing that I've started doing is like building that into my CTF as like a final question where it's like, I will give you points, just give me feedback, please, because otherwise, you know, I don't really know whether this was fun, what challenges you liked, what you hated, what was too hard, what was too easy. And those are the things I care about. All right. So I'll skip ahead a ways. Many years later, and there's a team called, well, they're called OpenSOC. The idea is they use open source tools to teach you how to defend like a security operations center. So you're, you know, an incident responder and you're watching stuff coming in and you have all these tools that are like real tools, like real world, you know, Seams and things like Zeek and Splunk. I don't want to say Splunk because Splunk is an open source, but Elastic, Graylog, Moloch for packet capture stuff, like all these tools that like real companies use this stuff. And so the idea was like, we want to make this so that anybody can just come in and like, you don't have to have a whole lab to set all these things up and you don't have to have like, you know, these real world attacks. We do that for you and you just get to sit down and play. And so there was a whole team of people that made this happen. You know, so Eric came up with the idea. He bought a bunch of the hardware. Short Stack is she is one of the most incredible people I've seen just do DevOps magic. So she can just build the environment and tear it down and make changes and monitor it and like do all these things that were amazing. Matt Bromley, who became a really good friend of mine after this, would write scenarios. So we'd write all these things and we'd model it after like what real attackers were doing. So when you were playing in our environment and you were seeing these artifacts, like they mimicked, if you were to go Google that, you would find some report that like Mandiant or McAfee or like somebody had just written to say like, oh yeah, here's like, you know, somebody from China that just broke into this, you know, unnamed government contractor, and like that the IP address was the same. Like we tried to make it match as much as we could. And so there were a whole group of people, you know, I was in there too. I was with the Metasploit team at the time. So I would generally be trying to make exploits and make like automate exploits and things like that. There were so many people, and this continues to grow as we do this. So this starts off, if you've ever had a NUC, an Intel NUC, there's these little, that's a Skull Canyon, but it's a little, you know, kind of Kleenex sized box, a little flatter, but it's a you know, a PC. So, I mean, it's got an I think these were the ones that had the i7s. They have new ones with i9s in them. And so like, this is what we traveled around with, and we put ESX on those, and, you know, had storage and had a little crappy switch and a little access point. And like, we could just show up and do this. We actually ended up making this really awesome, like Pelican case, like a foam case that everything just like slid into. And so like we could take this on the road, and we had a lot of fun building this. So like that was the access point, the switches, the NUCs, the disk array, like cables, external hard drive, like done. Let's go. And so this was a blast. Like our goal was to make this event that anybody could show up and learn how to do incident response. And it wasn't so much like, you know, you're trying to attack each other directly, but you're all looking at the same artifacts together. And then you're answering questions and trying to find, you know, the interesting artifacts that come out of it. And like the whole point at the time was just like to make it so that people could just, if you knew nothing, if you've never seen these tools before, if you've never had a chance to do this before, that you could come and just sit down, open up a web browser, and start playing. And so we did this in person. We did it in Austin, B-Sides Austin. We did B-Sides San Antonio. We did InfoSec Southwest, which is another conference in Austin. We traveled around and just were doing this, and it was a blast. Like we were having fun as a team. People were just constantly coming up to us and just saying like, "Hey, that's really cool. I learned things," or like, I never thought about this as like a job or a career, and so like this is something I really want to do. And then we'd come back and like, someone would tweet us 3 months later and be like, "Hey, I landed a job in a SOC and I got to use a lot of the stuff that I learned in OpenSOC to like talk to my experience." And like, hell yeah, that is the best possible thing someone could tell me. So we're going around to these conferences. I mentioned like, I think this was, I'm going to say InfoSec Southwest. We did B-Sides DC. And like people would show up and spend all night playing this, and it was a blast to run. So we had an open source scoreboard. So I learned from my mistakes, and we found an open source scoreboard that handled a lot of this for us, and it did a pretty good job. I mean, it was kludgy. It was when we were like trying to unlock challenges or do things. It's like clicking around and whatnot, but whatever. Okay, cool. It's stable. It works, and we don't have to write it and get, exploited by it. So honestly, I think the best thing that came from this was learning to build a solid team, was learning to, get people who were comfortable with each other, who can kind of get a feel for what their role is and feel like they can contribute, and having enough people that you can make an event that really makes a difference, and then you can repeat it. And if someone has to step out, or someone can't make it to San Antonio, or someone's busy in Austin that week or whatever, cool, like no worries, we can do this. We all know how this works. So all right, we got all these things doing. As I said, like we had a blast. People learning things, they're having fun. What would be cool is if we took this to DEF CON. Like where else? I mean, DEF CON, for those of you who don't know, is where the attackers live. Like it's where all the red team people are, all the people who are like, I'm badass, I can hack into anything. Like that's the stereotype that DEF CON brings with it. And so to show up and say, all right, listen, I know you think you're good at breaking into things, but how good are you at finding those, like how loud are you when you're running these tools? Do you even know the logs you're leaving behind, all the artifacts that you're leaving behind for a defender to call you out, to be able to say, oh yeah, I know exactly what that tool is, let me block it? Well, okay, what could possibly go wrong? How hard could it be? Well, you remember that open source scoreboard I talked about? Not so great when you really put it under the load of like, I don't know, a bunch of people at DEF CON. And I don't mean like they were hacking into it or whatever. What I mean is like I don't think the developers who made this had written it to scale to the sheer number of people that we had. And so like 271 people, 115 teams wasn't really that much. But with just the sheer amount of traffic that we were getting on the DEF CON network, yeah, we had a hard time keeping the scoreboard up, and that was definitely a point of frustration. The other thing that I really wasn't, I was not at all prepared for is when you go to something like this, you're going to deal with a caliber of person who is going to choose to play your CTF nonstop over things like sleeping and eating. And for some of you that might make sense, but for me, I was like, really? Put it down, like go get some rest or something. It's gonna be fine. And so no matter how much you put in this, they're going to come back and they're going to, keep coming at it and trying to break through every challenge you could think of. So a couple things came from that. As I said, the scoreboard definitely exploded, and we had to, be on top of it the entire weekend, restarting it and nursing it along. The defensive tools actually didn't scale, so that was a whole nother problem, because when you think about If you've ever used, like some of these tools like Splunk or Elastic or Graylog or any of these tools that basically they put all your logs in one place and then you can search through them, right? But the idea is that you have a team, like in a company of like 5 people, and they're going through this huge amount of data. Whereas what we'd done was we had a fairly small amount of data, and then we had hundreds of people beating on it with queries, poorly written queries that would just destroy this poor infrastructure. So like, I'm not throwing shade at these tools. They weren't made to do this. And that was something that we had to struggle with. The last thing I'll say for like this first year that I walked away with was like, these people are nuts. There's no way that you're going to have enough content that they'll just like, okay, cool, I'm done, I'm happy. And it blows my mind at a place like DEF CON where there's tens of thousands of people, where there's dozens of villages, there are dozens of competitions, there's world-class talks, and you're in Vegas. I don't care about the Vegas part. I actually hate the Vegas part, but for some people, whatever. Yeah, Alex, don't give me that. Yeah. The point being that the fact that someone would choose to spend their entire DEF CON weekend playing this event, playing our event, and just forgo everything else was not even a thought that crossed my mind. I did not anticipate that. So like, that's a huge compliment, but it's also was just, I was off by an order of magnitude in terms of like the level of effort that was going to take from us. And the downside of that is that you will burn out. Your team is, if you're going to try and support that number of people and keep that infrastructure alive and do it nonstop, like there's hundreds of them, there's like 10 of you. You can't. So like that was something that we had to learn and to understand and figure out, like, okay, we need to shut down, or we need to have shifts, or we need to make it so that like people can get some rest. So okay, lessons learned from this. Load test your scoreboard. Way easier said than done. I love the fact that I can just write that on a bullet and be like, oh yeah, just go load test your scoreboard. That's a really, really difficult thing to do. My advice, go take it to DEF CON. They'll load test your scoreboard for you. Anticipate that way more people are going to play than you're expecting. And so what we've learned over the years, I'm talking 2018 here, but even since then, is we just double the number. We're just like, hey, it'd be really cool if we got like 500 people and like 1,000 people show up, and we're like, oh crap, does our hardware support that? Do we like we weren't at all expecting this level of response. We learned actually that the tool developers were really open to having us say like, hey, we're seeing like under load, like this error comes up, or this is crashing, or this seems to, like this is not performing well. And like they would come in and do like live patching, like hot patching in our infrastructure to be like, okay, let's test this, let's see if this works. And they loved it because they would never otherwise get to see this level of load on their tools. And also because like their tools are in the spotlight and they want to look good. So it actually was a really handy thing I'm just noticing, take UTCTF to DEF CON. Yes, no, pass, good luck, have fun. My whole point in this talk is to like convince you of all the things that can go wrong. If you're going to take UTCTF to DEF CON, then I've clearly failed at my goals. So one of the things for me, and this is a personal point, don't expect to keep everybody occupied all the time. So people are going to get to the end of the challenge that you have and be comfortable saying, cool, that's what we've got for today. We'll unlock more challenges tomorrow. We're going to shut down at 9 p.m. tonight because we've got to sleep. Like we've got to, de-stress and go get food and like all of those things. But even just during the day, scheduling rotations and things is big. So this is something that to me, like, care for your team, care for yourself, do not expect to go in there and pull this off without some limitations. So DEF CON 2019, of course we go back. Why wouldn't we go back? It hurt the first time. So, but no, it's cool. We figured it out. We got this now. we've got these awesome Dell PowerEdge servers. Short Stack, our DevOps person, kept saying we needed more RAM, so we got her some RAM. And like we had a way beefier infrastructure. Thank you, Alice, for catching that. So yeah, we had way beefier infrastructure, and we're like, all right, cool. We're prepared for like double the number of people that we got last year. We're good. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I already told you, like, anticipate, more people than you can expect. So we had about 541 people. One of the things that we did this for this year, or for this 2019, is we moved to what was called zero tier. If you're not familiar with it, basically it's like it's like a VPN almost, except that you don't have to like connect to a central server. Like it's kind of like almost like a mesh network, a little bit of a peer-to-peer setup, which means that people could come in, they could register, we would authorize them on our zero tier network, and then they didn't have to be in the room because there was no room that was going to hold 541 people. That wasn't going to happen. So we had to be open and say like, okay, come in, check in with us. Part of the worry there is like, if we just open this up to the world, anybody can come in and break everything. So it was like, come in, check with us, give me, show me your zero tier ID. I'll authorize you. And then like, you can go back to your hotel or play at a restaurant or like go wander the con or hang out at talks or like go wherever, and you're good to go. The other thing we did that year is we added the finals round. And that was kind of the idea of making it so that people who were just getting started could have fun, but the people who were there to show off and win would get the chance. So the idea was, Friday, Saturday, we're doing OpenSOC. Saturday night, we stop. And then we would rebuild everything, and we would have a whole new finals round on Sunday. Can anybody see the flaw in this plan? When I say rebuild everything overnight, what I really mean to say is stay up all night rebuilding your entire infrastructure and having to retest everything and get no sleep for the next day for the finals round. Not the best plan, but Nathan, I don't know what to tell you. Huck, I'm going to call you Nathan. That's how mad I am right now. I don't know what to tell you. It seemed like a good idea at the time. That's the best I can say. Okay. All right. So one of the coolest things that came out of yeah, you can quote me on that. One of the coolest things that came out of DEF CON last year was, if you're not familiar with DEF CON, there's this tradition of black badges, which means if you do something really cool, like win, one of these competitions, there's a select number of competitions that receive a black badge that they can give to the winning team. And so they're like these really cool looking badges for starters. But they're also ones that, like, if you're walking around DEF CON and you're wearing one of these, like, people are looking at you like, wow, that person must like be really, really good at something. They're I'm trying not to use profanity, but whatever. They're impressive. So one of these, okay, fine, thank you. They're hot shit. Like, if you see somebody walking down the hall with one of these black badges, you're like, that person's badass. I want to know what they did to get that. It's a status thing. The badges themselves are cool. One of them I think is like radioactive. I don't even know. Yeah. So like, they do cool stuff for black badges. And we got to have one. So we got to give only one because they're coveted. But our winning team got a black badge. And so that gets you lifetime entry into the conference, which is, kind of cool. But it's hugely a status thing. And we got one, which was awesome. Now, that was a big motivator for a lot of the team. For me, I like seeing people learn. And so it, like, getting people on Twitter who would come back and write to us, or people who would send us an email and just be like, hey, this was my first time at DEF CON. It just so happened 3 weeks after the con, one of my clients was breached, and like all the stuff I learned at DEF CON turned out to be so useful to this. And we actually arrested the person who hacked into our network. Like, this was awesome. Thank you. Like, the black badge I get, like that's a status thing, and for a lot of the people on our team, you know, that is an honor, and I will not dismiss that. But this is what I live for. Like this stuff is what keeps me coming back. So fortunately, DEF CON 2020, one of the best things to come out of 2020 is DEF CON 2020 was canceled. And this is always a joke that DEF CON's canceled. But like, no, seriously this year, do not show up to Vegas. DEF CON is canceled. It's not going to happen. Everybody, oh, wait, we're actually going to do it. We're going to do DEF CON 2020. We're just going to do it virtual now. So they made what they called DEF CON safe mode. And the idea was, okay, well, I guess what could possibly go wrong? It seemed like a good idea at the time. Let's take this totally virtual. Like, let's do a fully remote CTF. Let's use zero tier, which I'm still going to call a VPN. I don't care what you yell at me for. We'll keep the idea of the finals round, but we're going to have to make some changes to make this be virtual. Discord was something that, I mean, yes, I'm an old curmudgeon. I get that. I literally have white hair. I just figured out like Discord is actually really freaking awesome. So the ability for us to be on Discord, to like scale that well, to be able to do like video conferencing and screen sharing and like have music channels and like all this stuff was fantastic. The thing that was not so great is that because this went virtual, DEF CON's like, hey, you don't have to be in Vegas. You can be anywhere in the world and tune in and watch these talks and play in the competition, which means now we went from like, okay, well, there's 10,000 people, or a couple 10,000s of people in Vegas, to like anyone in the world can come play this. It also meant that we weren't in the same room as a team. Before, we're behind a table, and if like things are on fire, you're like, hey, short stack, look at this, help me figure out how I, fix this database, or can we hot patch this or whatever. And that made it much harder not being, looking over each other's shoulder. It made things more tense. We dropped a lot of balls. Like it was not entirely great. Huck, I'm glad that you've also lived at least some of this pain. Yeah, there are people, working all through the night to deal with infrastructure issues, for sure. That's not at all uncommon. I will say one thing that didn't happen in 2020. There was no black badges, because the idea of a black badge was like they had to really be able to figure out which events were the best ones, and because we weren't physically there, they couldn't really tell us as easily. So there are no black badges. That didn't really bother me. Honestly, that was almost more of a relief than anything else. But for some people, that sucked. So what we learned from this is zero tier is actually really awesome. I actually really like zero tier for this. We could have done a lot more to automate it. Zero tier has an awesome API, so we could have had like people join in Discord and then like authenticate, like fill out the registration form and authenticate, and then have a Discord bot call out to zero tier API and like automatically authorize them. Like we could have done all kinds of stuff. But I'm sold on zero tier. I really like it. The finals round, I think, is still a solid plan to keep people, like there are people who just want to show up and just like, I just want to, if I can play through a scenario, I just want to kind of get a feel for this as I'm going from like event to event, right? Cool. Like I want those people. But then there's also people who want to stay up 72 hours and they want to win a black badge and like have their name at the top of the leaderboard. So the finals round does a good job of kind of like giving some easier scenarios for folks to get started, and then the folks at the top tier of that we invite back for the finals round. This last year we switched to CTFD. I'm a huge fan of CTFD. It does have its hiccups for sure. There's a lot of stuff that I've learned to do on the back end. It has issues with like being single threaded and a lot of other calling out CTFD threading. Yes, for sure. But so I think that we could with some small changes really make it scale. It still did well for us on good hardware. I mean, we just threw this up in AWS and we're just like, this is what the cloud is for. Give me big beefy boxes and just like lots of RAM and let this thing go. Remember how I talked about tools and how like people would use like just really bad queries, or they keep hammering something and bring it down. So we had some custom front ends. And the idea would be that, like, it would check queries, or would rate limit you, or like you would click through some tables and it would help you build a query, which was helpful if you wanted to learn. But it also stopped people from doing like all these, what was effectively like select star on all these databases and just like crushing everything. So that worked out really well. One thing that I think we definitely dropped the ball on this year, especially being that it was virtual and we tried to do a lot of round the clock stuff, we did not do a good job of like scheduling shifts and taking it on, apparently as Huck also decided, for that length of time is not a good plan. You don't want to have single points of failure. You want to have people who you can hand things off to, and you want to have shifts whereby people can go back and relax and take a break and come back and be recharged and go back at it again. 36 hours like you're talking about, Huck, yeah, that sucks. 72 hours, it's the sort of thing that's just like, I don't want to go back, I don't want to do this again. But anyway, I think overall the event was a huge success. We got a lot of really good feedback from it, and for being virtual, I'm game. So I got one more. This is one that I mentioned that my job now is I get to teach and I get to build CTFs. So like I get to do it right in my way, right? So what could possibly go wrong? I like doing stuff in person, and so I did a lot of these in conferences, and then obviously, so now a lot of it's remote. But I will say that I've been super impressed with Zoom, and so we've been doing all of these via Zoom. But the CoreLight CTF, which is it's all just using Zeek data with the same kind of idea of finding artifacts and hunting down attackers, is made to be much more fun. So my expectation is like, you don't know Zeek when you show up to this. Cool, no worries, that's fine. I'm gonna give you a little intro at the beginning to show you how the logs work and stuff. You're gonna get some prizes. It's gonna be easy for noobs to kind of learn, but also have volunteers that when people are struggling, we'll take you in a breakout room, we'll do a little one-on-one screen sharing and like personalized help, which has been awesome. And I want to give people different opportunities to solve flags. When I say like different choices, I don't mean just like you can write a different query. I mean like, here's a bunch of tools with the same data in them. You want to go learn Splunk? Cool. You want to learn Elastic? That's fine. You want to learn like command line, open source Zeek stuff? Cool. That works too. Same data, all three places. Like, go have fun. If you're comfortable with the tool, stick with it. If you're not, here's a way to learn one. So this has actually been the most fun I've ever had. Like, the fact that I get paid to do this is, to me, a little criminal. I really enjoy teaching people more than I like, the status thing and the torturing people so that, it's like only the best are going to win this. I want people to walk away having learned stuff. So I kind of have a team of volunteers now, which means that I can structure, here's how we'd walk someone through this. Here's the right answer, but like, here's how you would arrive at that. And I've been really impressed. We've had, I think we've just broke like 1,500 people that had registered for this and have played through it. And we do it like regularly, but it's usually small sessions. It's usually like small groups, and we get to do that, like a lot of that one-on-one interaction. And I try to make it fun. So I get a lot of flack because I have a Slack, reset. I have a Spotify playlist called Songs to Capture Flags too. And so like, people are always telling me like, that's an awesome playlist. And then I'll share the link, and people, anyway, I think I get, about equal compliments on like the quality of the CTF as I do the playlist. But like, we're in there, we got a couple of us, we're like giving shout outs on the scoreboard. Like we're cheering on people like, yeah, this, so-and-so has been holding on to first, but like second place is just a couple points behind, like doing that kind of stuff and making it fun. So this is definitely the most fun I've had making CTFs. I've kind of charted my own path for sure, because this is different than what you might get from somebody who's talking about like writing a DEF CON CTF. But like, I want people to go and like have an easy question and, you know, feel confident in how they got the answer and like get the dopamine rush of just like, yes, I solved it. Let me do the next one. Let me do the next one. And like slowly build up the skills they need to do something that, you know, is actually applicable in the real world. So a couple things I learned from this. AWS has been my friend because I do a lot of these. Like I spin these up and tear them down. So for like different regions, different events, different conferences, you know, for like, we did one for ISSS. And so if you aren't familiar with CloudFormation, the idea is like you build this whole templated language of the things that you need. And so like you give it inputs and say like, all right, this is the subdomain and here's the AMI, like the image that I want to use. And you define like the EC2 instances and all these things. And then you just kick it off and you can just build these stacks, and you can just have as many of them as you want, and you can build them up and tear them down whenever you need. And it's been pretty slick. It's been super helpful and really customizable. So that has been fantastic. I guess overall, so just to, you know, kind of wrap up here, what I've learned, I like building CTFs more than playing them. I don't, you know, I recognize that's not everybody, but I like teaching. I like showing people, you know, new cool tricks, or, you know, and that can be like cool attacks they haven't seen before, but also like cool defensive tools they haven't seen before. But I think there's an art to writing a challenge, that when you're writing a CTF challenge, you don't want it to be frustrating. You want it to be, you know, engaging and challenging, but it should always be a little bit obvious what the next step should be. Like you should know, okay, well, I think I should try this. And then if you do that, and there should be something that kind of unlocks a little bit, or something that shows you like, okay, yeah, but now there's this other complication. Now let me do this. So it kind of guides you along. And so I think it's difficult to do that. But if you do it well, it makes for a really fun challenge and a really cool event. Ultimately, my goal is to teach people. I don't want, you know, like if you look at the DEF CON CTF, they'll do things like invent a 7-bit assembly language that's like custom. And it's just because it breaks everybody's tools and no one knows how to deal with it. And it's like torture. Now, that said, I totally respect that there are people that are like, you talked about that, and now I'm Googling it because I want to know more about this. Okay, but like the thing that makes me happy is things that are realistic and things that teach people how to you know, use a real world tool to solve a real world problem. Certainly, sticking with open source stuff has been you know, as best I can, fantastic. So whether that's, you know, CTFD, again, I'm still a fan of. Yes, Huck, I'll put a link to my playlist in the chat. No, you know what? No, I accept donations. It's a donations only. It's a subscriber stream to get to the playlist. But seriously, like, do open source stuff when you can. CTFD, I like. It's let me customize a lot. And, you know, certainly things that are more open, like things like zero tier, things like well, yeah, I mean, basically anytime you get the chance to kind of have something that has an open architecture, open source, lean for it. But make it as approachable and fun as possible. Don't charge people to play. Don't make it so like there's a cumbersome registration process. If it doesn't have to be on site, then don't do it. But keep it fun, keep it engaging, keep it lively, like make it so that, you know, you make fun of yourself, you congratulate people, you make people feel good. And on that line, like, be prepared to land on your face. Like, be prepared to screw up a few times. Your infrastructure will go down, your scoreboard will crash, you write a challenge that turns out to be unsolvable. These things happen. They happen to everyone. It's not your fault. It's not that you know, you're bad, or that you're, oh God, Huck just doxed my playlist. Well, fortunately, that's not being recorded, so no one will know. But you're gonna land on your face when you do this, and that's fine. Recognize that like the people who are there playing your event are there because they want to learn. They want to have fun. They want you to succeed just as much as you want to succeed. So, you know, don't sweat it, but just be prepared for things to kind of explode, and that's just the nature of it. It's going to be okay. So I don't know, maybe my hope, I guess I said at the beginning of this talk, I'm trying to talk you out of writing a CTF, but maybe like at the end of this, you're like, okay, I wouldn't mind writing a CTF or getting into writing CTF challenges. If you do, I would encourage you, definitely play some CTFs. Obviously, ISSS has some. We talked about UT CTF. There's all kinds of events that are constantly going on. If you look at like ctftime.org, where there's just calendars every weekend. It has something, some conference doing something. And different CTFs will have different focuses. So find something that's your niche. For me, it's kind of like network forensics and like, you know, digital forensics, incident response, like those things that are what I enjoy. And so, you know, finding that might help you if you're more into reverse engineering, if you're more into like crypto, cool, like that's fine. But also consider that like, it may be, you know, writing challenges might be how you contribute. It might be, you know, maintaining infrastructure, doing DevOps. It might be actually organizing the event, doing, you know, keeping people on task and advertising and getting sponsorships and like all of that. I personally really like helping people one-on-one. So it can be game day where like you haven't done much previous to this, but you show up and you're helping people, you're mentoring people during the event, because that's something that you often need a lot of help with. That's just a small sample of some of the things that you can do, but figure out, you know, if you do want to contribute, how you might want to do that. Start small. 20 people, like 50 people, that an LLCTF event was pushing it. That was brutal. If you're going for like 20 people, that's definitely a heck of a lot easier. And you can repeat it and scale it and grow it up, and that's fine. But I would encourage you, when you're doing stuff like this, in my experience, the things that are going to be the most successful is when someone can just show up with no previous background, no environment, no special tools. I don't like having to, you know, compile tools from scratch, or having to download Kali, or having to have like IDA Pro, which, you know, obviously people would pirate instead of actually paying for. Like don't make people do that. Make it so that they can use open source stuff, so they can use the expertise that they're gaining in your event to go back and like talk about it in a job interview, or go back to, you know, to work and use it the next day. I think probably the most important thing, the single most important thing, and I guess this is just an all-around life lesson, build your team, figure out, you know, the kinds of people that you want to work with, that will support you and that you can support, and make sure you care for each other. If you find yourself in situations where you're frustrated with other people, figure out why. Figure out how to communicate better, work through that. If you find, you know, some people, when it gets high pressure and they shut down because, you know, they're stressed and they're feeling very pressured, you know, go to them, say, okay, let's work through this. How can I help? You know, and if you're that kind of person, be mindful of that, and you know, be ready to ask for help, or to say, listen, you know, I'm in over my head. I wrote this challenge. It's not working. Can somebody take a look at it? Because that's the whole point of the team, is to get different perspectives from each other. And I've learned so much just by being part of the team. There's no way I could have done half the stuff I've ever done if I'd not had some of the people alongside me making these events and learning stuff like how to do things in AWS, how to stand up CTFD, you know, how to work with things like Zoom, and how to, you know, advertise events and organize, like all of these things, all these skill sets I've learned from my teammates. But at the same time, don't overwork people. Make sure that, you know, you're taking care of each other. In in-person events, it's like, hey, you haven't eaten lunch in a while, go get some food. You know, for virtual events, it's, hey, you know, you've been, you know, on Discord for I don't know how many hours, go get some sleep. We'll take care of stuff. It's going to be fine. You know, whatever that is, but learn to take care of your team, and you'll do awesome things. So anyway, I went a little bit longer than I told Alex I would. Sorry. I do want to say that, like, seriously, I do want, I welcome your questions. You know, I would say, you know, you're welcome to ask now. I'll keep an eye on chat. Reach out to me afterwards. Alex mentioned the UTCTF. There's a UTCTF Slack, which Alex can get you. Yeah, that's why you got added, Huck, is because you weren't paying attention. The UTCTF Slack is actually, it's a fun community. It's a good place to learn things. We talk about events, and you can just come hang out, and you're not expected to show up, you know, knowing how to do things. That's the point. We're there to learn. But hit me up on the UTCTF Slack, hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on email, whatever. And yeah, so that's all I got. I'm going to say, Alex, if you want